This is the story of the man who ended the Cold War before it began, and the world is still benefiting from his actions today. And we all know that the Cold War was a strange one. It was a period of geopolitical tension between the United States and the Soviet Union. But unlike previous wars, there were no battles fought or shots fired. Instead, it was characterized by an arms race, economic competition, and propaganda. The two superpowers never directly confronted each other in war, but they did engage in proxy conflicts around the world. This resulted in millions of deaths. But what if I told you that one man could have ended this conflict before it even started? His name was Andrei Sakharov, and he was a Soviet scientist who developed the Soviet Union's first nuclear bomb. That's right. He literally had the power to destroy the world in his hands. But instead of using it for evil, he became a vocal critic of the Soviet nuclear program and even helped the US end the Cold War. So how did he do it? Let's find out. Andrei Sakharov was born in 1921 in the Russian town of Moscow. His father was a military engineer and his mother was a mathematician. So it's no surprise that Andrei followed in their footsteps and studied physics at Moscow State University. But little did he know that this education would play a key role in ending the Cold War. After graduating in 1944, Sakharov was recruited by the Soviet military to work on a top-secret project, the development of a Soviet atomic bomb. He was part of a team of scientists led by the physicist Igor Kirchhoff. Working on this project put him at the forefront of nuclear research, and it gave him a unique insight into the destructive power of the weapon he was helping to create. As a brilliant scientist, Sakharov quickly rose through the ranks, and by 1949, he was awarded the title of Doctor of Sciences for his contributions to the Soviet nuclear program. But after the successful testing of the RDS-37 atomic bomb in 1949, which was the first ever nuclear weapon test in the Soviet Union, Sakharov's life took an unexpected turn. Instead of basking in the glory of their success, the Soviet leaders decided to halt the nuclear weapons program. They believed that the bomb was too dangerous and unpredictable to be used, and they didn't want to risk the consequences. Sakharov and his colleagues were deeply disappointed, but they respected their government's decision. However, just 3 years later, the Chinese tested their own nuclear bomb, which shocked the Soviets into restarting their weapons program. This time they wanted to create something bigger and better than before. But this new bomb required more power than ever before, and that meant finding a new source of plutonium-239, the key ingredient in making an atomic bomb. This is where things got really interesting because the only way to get plutonium-239 was to use graphite reactors, which were much less efficient than the reactors used for the RDS-37. Not only that, but these reactors were also prone to producing large amounts of radioactive waste. So the government turned to Sakharov and his team to develop a safer and more efficient reactor. The task seemed impossible, but Sakharov was up for the challenge. He and his colleagues worked tirelessly for months, until finally they came up with a solution. A new type of reactor that used water instead of graphite to slow down the neutrons and produce plutonium-239. It was a breakthrough that would change the course of history, because it allowed the Soviet Union to produce enough plutonium-239 to build a much more powerful bomb. The Tsar Bomba, which to this day remains the largest nuke ever detonated. Now you might be wondering, why is this important? Well, you see, while working on this project, Sakharov couldn't help but notice the sheer destructive power of the weapons he was helping to create. He realized that if the Soviet Union were to use these weapons in a conflict with the United States, it could potentially end all human life on Earth. So he started to have second thoughts about his work. He began to question the purpose of developing such powerful weapons, and he started to speak out against the Soviet nuclear program. Of course, this was a risky move, because criticizing the government was not exactly a popular one in the Soviet Union. In fact, it was seen as a crime, and people who spoke out against the government were often silenced. But Sakharov was a man on a mission. He knew that the future of humanity depended on his actions, and he was ungoing to back down. So he started writing letters to government officials expressing his concerns about the dangers of nuclear war and calling for a reduction in nuclear weapons. He also began to speak out at scientific conferences, using his platform to raise awareness about the destructive power of nuclear weapons and urging his fellow scientists to join him in his cause. His actions did not go unnoticed. Soon he was summoned to a meeting with the Soviet leaders to discuss his criticisms of the nuclear program. They tried to persuade him to change his mind, but Sakharov stood firm. He refused to be intimidated, and he continued to speak out against the Soviet nuclear program. It was clear that the government was unhappy with Sakharov's actions. They stripped him of his awards and honors and banned him from publishing his work. But Sakharov was undeterred. He knew that he was fighting for a greater cause, and he was ungoing to let anything stop him. In 1968, Sakharov co-authored an article in the prestigious scientific journal Nature, calling for an international treaty to ban countries from testing nuclear weapons. This was a bold move that put him in the crosshairs of the Soviet government. But Sakharov was undeterred, and he continued to speak out against nuclear weapons. His efforts did not go unnoticed. In 1975, he was awarded the Lenin Peace Prize for his work on nuclear disarmament. It was a prestigious award that recognized his contributions to the peace movement, and it gave him a platform to continue his activism. But Sakharov's work didn't end there. He was instrumental in the creation of the International Campaign to Stop Nuclear Weapons, a global movement that brought together scientists, politicians, and activists from around the world to call for an end to the nuclear arms race. He traveled extensively, giving lectures and speeches about the dangers of nuclear weapons and the need for disarmament. Despite the risks, Sakharov continued to speak out against nuclear weapons throughout the Cold War. His efforts were instrumental in raising awareness about the dangers of nuclear war and the need for disarmament. And when the Cold War finally ended in 1991, it was in large part due to the efforts of people like Sakharov. So there you have it, the story of the Soviet scientist who ended the Cold War before it began. Andrei Sakharov may not have been a household name, but his contributions to ending the Cold War and preventing nuclear war are undeniable. So here's to you, Andrei Sakharov, the man who had the power to destroy the world and chose to save it instead. Now that's a story worth telling and remembering. But our work here is not yet done. We need to keep spreading the word about the importance of nuclear disarmament and the dangers of nuclear war. So please join us in this important cause. Together, we can make a difference. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on any of our future videos. Thanks for watching.